You might have heard a lot of hype about Thunderbolts, the latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. People are loving it, but is it actually good? And more importantly, does the movie actually have something important to say about mental health? You're probably thinking, there's no way a Marvel movie could actually tackle a serious and heavy topic, say, like depression, and do it with nuance through a heartfelt, character-driven story. There's no way that the MCU could do that, right? Right? Well, today I'm going to discuss how Thunderbolts attempts to explore these heavy-hitting issues and what it's really trying to say. Does it actually have any depth to it? Ever since Endgame, everyone knows the story. The MCU is not what it used to be. Many would agree that they've failed to take the multiverse story to its full potential. They've focused on cash grabs, on stories that didn't satisfy the audience. The movies don't feel connected, it's oversaturated, it's stale. The list could go on and on. Personally, I agree with a lot of these criticisms, yet before every single Marvel movie, I'd let myself get sucked into the hype. I'd think, okay, this is going to be the one where they get back on track. It's going to be good. It's going to recapture some of my childhood memories of these. And every time I'd walk out the theater feeling bitterly disappointed. My expectations were barely ever met, and I would say they were pretty much never exceeded. These films and shows here are my picks for the best that Marvel's given us since Endgame, but sadly, there just hasn't been many good ones. But look, you didn't come to this video to hear about all these MCU problems. Let's get into the Thunderbolts discussion, and a major spoiler warning for you from here. So, the movie begins by showing us the life of Yelena. You know, Black Widow's sister. She was in the Black Widow movie and in Hawkeye, and she's like a lot of us these days. She clocks in and out of work, she doesn't feel fulfilled, she feels empty. Her dad, the Red Guardian, who she hasn't seen in a year, feels the same, aimless and empty. She gets called into one last job for her boss, Valentina de Fontaine, which turns out to be a trap, with Fontaine wanting to incinerate her old dirty laundry, which includes Yelena as well as John Walker, Ghost, and Taskmaster, who've all been duped into entering the De Fontaine facility after working for her. Taskmaster gets killed off fast in the initial skirmish between these characters, before they're shocked to realize that there's someone else in there. Bob, aka Sentry, the result of a dangerous human trial that's given him superpowers that he doesn't realize how to use yet. Long story short, these misfits escape. Pursued by Fontaine, they meet up with the Red Guardian and Bucky. They form an unlikely alliance, trying to take Fontaine down, before she manipulates Bob into becoming her new hero that she controls. Sentry/Bob turns on everyone, spreading a black void and transporting everyone who touches it into their darkest memories. Eventually, the gang all go into the void. They find Bob, who's lost control of his outside body, and help him confront his inner demons in order to regain control of himself. Because of this, everyone escapes the void and they become the new Avengers. Cut to credits. So I've given you a bit of a brief overview of the plot because I think it's important to have that in mind as we delve deeper into some of the deeper themes that I think this movie is exploring. But yeah, in the first half of this movie, I thought this was terrible. I was just not having a good time. It had your classic Marvel humor that, to me, so much of it didn't land and just felt so cringeworthy. It also had your classic Marvel plot contrivances, some silly logic, some stuff that just didn't feel like it really belonged, namely De Fontaine's intern. I just didn't think she really fitted in the movie and sort of felt like she took me out of the stakes a bit, but that's beside the point. The other thing as well that I did want to mention with my criticisms very briefly is the accents for Yelena and also the Red Guardian. Man, am I the only one that thinks they're really bad? Like, they're meant to be Russian, but half the time I feel like they just break into these American accents, and it just completely takes me out of the movie. But anyway, that's me complaining, nitpicking, because in the second half of this movie, it really started to cook. Every scene with Bob, aka Sentry, was just awesome. We learned that the guy comes from a background of family abuse, his life spiraled into addiction, he found himself drifting aimlessly through Southeast Asia until he was offered to take part in human trials trying to create the next powerful superhuman. When Bob touches people, we see them transported back into their darkest memories, their trauma, their deepest regrets. For Yelena, it's her first test for the Red Room, where she coaxes another child into the woods, leading to their execution. For John Walker, it's failing to be a good parent and a good partner, leading to divorce with his wife. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. When Fontaine attempts to kill Bob after he disobeys her orders, he morphs into a figure of darkness. There's no longer any trace of Bob on the outside. He's literally consumed, which we later learn is representative of his own mental state, his own demons. He is overcome by the deepest, darkest parts of himself, primarily hopelessness and despondency. He is literally seeing black. There's nothing left in the world but pain, and all he can do is spread that to everyone he touches. Earlier in the film, we see De Fontaine's traumatic past when she's touched by Bob. We see her as a younger girl accidentally betraying her father and causing his death. That scene really pulled at my heartstrings, and that's why I think that this movie is much more special than your average Marvel film, because we actually feel empathy for these characters, and not only the main characters, we feel empathy for the villain as well. I think it adds a lot of depth to her character, and a lot more dimension to her as a villain. In life, I don't think anyone in this world is born evil. We're all shaped by the moments in our lives, and how we respond to that is what creates the people that we are today. It might seem like a strange comparison, but this kind of depth is something that the recent film The Apprentice did with Donald Trump. Even though clearly he's just not a good person, but the film humanized him. Not to justify his actions, but to understand them, to understand how he came to be the twisted person that he is today. That is truly powerful storytelling, and it might seem crazy, but the Thunderbolts genuinely starts to do the same with Fontaine. Look, it is very brief, it's mainly just one scene, but that exploration beyond the surface level was something very refreshing to see for a Marvel villain. Everyone on Earth, everyone, including you watching this video, have some kind of darkness, or some kind of pain deep down that motivates us, or that traumatizes us, or that molds us into the people that we are today. The blackness of the void in Thunderbolts is an effective representation of this, and its spread across Manhattan shows how we all have these feelings and experiences. They can affect anyone and everyone. And when you're in a dark headspace, when these feelings and emotions can become so powerful, in that moment, it can be terribly difficult to see past that, to see anything other than what you're feeling. Sentry, in his dark state, is such a simple yet effective representation of that. And you can view this blackness, this void, as a metaphor for depression, for anxiety, for trauma, for any kind of mental disorder, or you can simply view it as a representation of our darker, negative emotions and how they can have the ability to take over if we choose to let them. Whether that's in the form of an emotional outburst, a bad day, an argument with a loved one, or something like a serious mental illness, I really think the void is a symbol for all of that. At the beginning of the film, we see Yelena joke with Bob that whenever she has negative feelings, she just pushes them down and forgets about them. At first, I thought this was another cringeworthy Marvel joke, another quippy one-liner that the writers thought would be really trendy and funny for young audiences watching. But this movie really redeemed itself when it came back to tackle that comment, to seriously examine and demonstrate how that coping method is not healthy. When Yelena is transported into the void, she's able to find Bob, who explains that that is what he does do. He pushes the negative emotions down, he tries to forget about them until they completely overtake him and he loses control. Inside the void, he's confronted with the physical representation of this side of himself, and in an attempt to confront and defeat that, he violently attacks this symbolic figure, which only makes it worse, spreading the darkness across his body. In a last-ditch effort to save him, the rest of the Thunderbolts, having made their way into the void in pursuit of Yelena, help to pull Bob away, holding him tight. The darkness slowly recedes, the music swells, and I was actually feeling a little bit emotional with this ending. Look, is this movie breaking new ground with what it's saying? Not really, but does that make anything that it discusses any less of an important message? I really don't think so. You could make the argument that there's plenty of other films that explore these ideas in a more profound way, that even my analysis here is pretty simplistic, but for a comic book movie, one that would normally end with a huge CGI punch-off, this movie manages to hit all the notes that you'd want from an exciting hero film, but also has enough depth and nuance to give it real cinematic value. That is not easy to find these days. It has the power to prompt thoughts and discussion about these important issues in society, and I think it represents them in a pretty unique way. Thunderbolts shows us how fighting fire with fire isn't the answer. Choosing to push down your trauma and pretend that it doesn't exist, or to fight it with other toxic things like substance abuse, for example, only risks letting the darkness consume you. We see that visually represented in Bobby's final confrontation in the void with his darker self. There's no solution through violence here. The moral of the story is that through the support and acceptance of those around you, through feeling that love, through feeling wanted and a part of something, you can make it through these dark emotions. You're always going to have that trauma, that pain, but you get through it with those around you by your side. That conclusion is 10 times more important than the formation of the new Avengers or any other multiverse shenanigans. Although I will say, those end credits, they were really cool, and that cutscene was genuinely epic. It had my audience gasping in excitement. I was so hyped, and also that scene with Bob on meth in a chicken costume, that was genuinely funny. So overall, I'm gonna give Thunderbolts 4 stars out of 5. Guys, that is currently sitting at number 10. It has made my top 10 Marvel films of all time. Big call, I know. If you did like this video, guys, please consider subscribing or leaving a like. Guys, is cinema back? Are we back? Yes! Yeah! We are so back. Let's frickin' go!